How many times have you checked your phone today without actually deciding to? Not because it rang, not because someone called, not because there was something you genuinely needed to do. Your hand just reached for it. You unlock the screen, check your messages, maybe email, maybe Instagram, maybe the news. Nothing particularly interesting has happened, so you put the phone down. And then, somehow a few minutes later, you want to check it again. That is the strange thing about compulsive checking. It gives you something, but it rarely gives you enough. More than 2,000 years ago, the Buddha built much of his philosophy around exactly this kind of problem. The restless feeling that something is missing, the urge to satisfy it, and the strange discovery that satisfying one desire often creates space for another. Early Buddhist texts call this taṇhā, usually translated as craving, and the Buddha connected craving with dukkha, suffering, distress, or the deeper unsatisfactoriness of experience. His answer was not simply to obey every desire, but it was not to declare war on yourself for having desires either. By the end of this video, we are going to turn that idea into one very simple experiment. The next time you desperately want to check your phone, you will wait 60 seconds, not to prove how disciplined you are, but to discover what the urge actually is. Because you may find that what feels like a command is really just a feeling. The phone you didn't decide to pick up. Imagine you are waiting for someone. They are 5 minutes late. Nothing is happening. Almost immediately your hand moves towards your pocket. Or you are watching a film. There is a slightly slow scene. Phone. You are working on something difficult. You get stuck. Phone. You get into bed. Phone. You wake up. Phone. You stand in a lift for 12 seconds. Apparently, even this now requires entertainment. None of these moments seems serious by itself. Checking your phone for 30 seconds is not ruining your life. But ask yourself a different question. What were you expecting to find? Sometimes there is a clear answer. You are waiting for a message. You need directions. You want to check the time. But often there isn't one. There is simply a small feeling of restlessness, followed by the possibility of stimulation. Maybe something happened. Maybe someone messaged you. Maybe there is something new. And if there isn't, you can refresh. We now have access to more stimulation than almost any human beings in history could have imagined. Yet boredom has not disappeared. Restlessness has not disappeared. The sense that something more interesting might be happening somewhere else has not disappeared. Perhaps the deeper problem is not simply that our phones contain too much stimulation. It is that almost every uncomfortable moment now comes with an escape hatch. Bored? Check. Anxious? Check. Work becoming difficult? Check. Conversation goes quiet? Check. And this is where an ordinary smartphone begins to look surprisingly interesting through the lens of Buddhist philosophy. What the Buddha called craving. The Buddha lived in northern India, roughly 2,500 years ago. He obviously had nothing to say about smartphones, but he spent an enormous amount of time examining something more fundamental. What happens when the mind is constantly reaching for the next thing? One of the central teachings of early Buddhism is organized around the Four Noble Truths. There is dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness. There are conditions that give rise to it. There is the possibility of its cessation. And there is a path of practice. Among the causes of suffering, the Buddha gives a particularly important role to taṇhā, craving. For our purpose, the important idea is simple. Craving says, "This moment is not enough. Give me something else." Something arrives. For a moment, the pressure drops. Then the mind finds another thing to want. There is an image in the Dhammapada of craving growing like a wandering vine, while a person jumps from one desired thing to another like a monkey searching for fruit. It feels surprisingly modern. Message, video, email, post, news, back to messages. The content keeps changing. The reaching continues. And that distinction matters, because if one particular app were the entire problem, deleting it would solve everything. Sometimes deleting an app helps, but many of us simply relocate the habit. Instagram disappears. Suddenly, email becomes fascinating. YouTube goes. Now the news needs checking every 12 minutes. The object changes. The reaching remains. The gap we almost never notice. Early Buddhist philosophy makes another useful distinction. Craving does not simply appear from nowhere. Experience happens. It feels pleasant, unpleasant, or somewhere in between. And then the mind reaches. For us, that means there may be a tiny gap between two things. I feel something, and I need to do something about it. Normally, they happen so quickly that they feel like one event. You are bored, so you check. You are anxious, so you check. Work feels difficult, so you check. But the feeling and the response are not the same thing. And once you begin noticing the difference, you gain a little room to choose. That becomes especially clear in 3 situations. 1. Boredom. The first is simple. Nothing is happening, so you reach for stimulation. The interesting question is not whether entertainment is bad. It is, what does boredom actually feel like if you don't immediately escape it? Maybe there is restlessness. Maybe your attention starts searching. Maybe there is a strange sense that you should be doing something. Most of us barely know, because the phone arrives before we have a chance to find out. And that means boredom may not be the unbearable state we think it is. We may simply have become very efficient at interrupting it. 2. Uncertainty. Now imagine you send someone a message. They do not reply. You check. Nothing. A few minutes later you check again. Still nothing. At this point, the phone is not really giving you entertainment. It is offering the possibility of relief. Maybe they replied. Maybe something changed. Maybe the uncertainty is over. The deeper craving may not be, I want to look at my phone. It may be, I want this uncertainty to disappear. That changes the problem. The phone is simply where you go when you do not want to feel what is already happening. And if there is still no reply, the uncertainty returns. So does the urge. 3. Difficulty. The third version often disguises itself as productivity. You are working, everything is fine, then you reach the difficult part. You do not know how to phrase something. You get confused. You are not sure whether your work is good enough. And suddenly your inbox becomes incredibly important. The timing is almost impressive. Again, the useful question is not, why do I keep checking email? It is, what happened immediately before I wanted to check? Confusion, frustration, self-doubt, mental effort? Sometimes we do not reach for our phones because the phone is especially attractive. We reach because the present moment has become slightly uncomfortable. And once you see that, compulsive checking starts to look less like a technology problem and more like a relationship with discomfort. If this idea is helping you see your own habits differently, like the video and subscribe. Past Minds takes philosophical ideas from across history and turns them into practical tools for modern life. And fortunately, none of the philosophers require you to throw your phone into a river, although a few of them might appreciate the symbolism. The mistake. Turning desire into an enemy. There is an important danger here. You can learn about craving and immediately turn self-control into another obsession. Now you want perfect discipline. You install 5 blocking apps. You create complicated rules. You get angry every time you slip. and suddenly the phone still controls your mood, just in a different way. This is where the Buddha's idea of a middle way is useful, with one important qualification. Historically, the middle way referred to avoiding two extremes: indulgence in sensual pleasure and harsh self-mortification, while following the noble eightfold path. So the Buddha did not literally teach, "Do not obey or suppress your phone urges." That is our modern application. But the contrast is still useful. One response is automatic indulgence. I want it, so I do it. Another is aggressive suppression. I want it, so I must fight it. There's a third possibility: observation. I want it. What exactly is happening? You do not have to obey the urge. You do not have to hate the urge. You can study it, and that is what the exercise is for. The 60-second craving experiment for the next 7 days. Choose one phone check each day and delay it by 60 seconds. You do not need to do this every time. One moment is enough. You feel the urge to check your phone. Maybe you are waiting. Maybe you are working. Maybe you just checked it 30 seconds ago and somehow civilization may have changed since then. Do not tell yourself, "I am not allowed to check." Tell yourself, "I can check in 60 seconds. Then leave the phone where it is and observe. First, where do you feel the urge? Is there physical restlessness? Does your hand almost move automatically? Does your attention keep returning to the phone? Second, what is underneath it? Boredom, anxiety, curiosity, loneliness, avoidance, the hope that something exciting happened? You do not need to analyze it deeply. Just notice. Third, watch what happens to the feeling. Does it become stronger? Does it stay the same? Does it weaken? Does another thought replace it? You are not trying to make the urge disappear, because then you would simply be making another demand. I will observe this feeling, but only if it goes away. You are learning what craving feels like when you don't instantly obey it. And after 60 seconds, here's the important part. You are allowed to check your phone. If you decide there is a reason to check it, check it. The exercise is not successful because you resisted. It is successful because for 60 seconds you saw the urge before acting on it. You inserted awareness between wanting and doing. That is the practice. And after several days, you may begin noticing something surprising. Not every urge deserves an answer. Some disappear, some reveal boredom, some reveal anxiety, some reveal avoidance, and some reveal that, yes, you actually need to answer a message. The point is not to turn your phone into a forbidden object. It is to understand the relationship you have with it. Conclusion: your phone is probably not going anywhere, nor should it. It is useful. It connects you with people. It gives you information. It contains maps, music, photographs, books, conversations, and approximately 17 apps you cannot remember installing. The goal is not to become someone who never wants stimulation. The Buddhist diagnosis goes deeper than that. Craving keeps whispering, something else, something new, something more, something different from this moment. And the danger is not merely that we spend too much time looking at screens. It is that we become less able to experience wanting without immediately obeying it. So the next time your hand reaches for your phone without a clear reason, do nothing. For 60 seconds, feel the restlessness, notice the expectation, watch the mind search for its next piece of fruit, and then decide. Because for our small, modern version of this ancient problem, freedom does not mean owning a phone you never touch. It means being able to feel the urge to reach for it, without assuming that the urge gets to decide what happens next.